Hello and welcome to our 13th episode of the Well Project's A Girl Like Me Live, which is a new interactive live streaming series advancing health and wellness discussions and education among women living with and vulnerable to HIV. Every 2 weeks, I, Cece Covin, will sit down with different co-hosts to chat about key topics in our community. In today's episode, I'm so excited. We have Tiommi Luckett with us, and we're honoring Transgender Day of Remembrance, and I just can't wait to get into this conversation. So what I'm going to ask you to do, Tiommi, is introduce yourself, your affiliations, and how did you come across the Well Project?
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Tiommi Luckett. I am in Little Rock, Arkansas. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm a woman of trans experience living with HIV. I came across the Well Project at a conference. I came across Krista at a conference. And Krista actually asked me to blog for the Well Project. So I started blogging for the Well Project. And then I became like a steering committee member, an community advisory board member. But the Well Project was actually the first organization to give me employment inside the HIV field. And so since then, I moved on from the Well Project as the communications coordinator for a short while to become the communications assistant at Positive Women's Network USA, where I just left. And now I'm a national organizer at Transgender Law Center.
Oh, so you be working.
Yeah, I be working. Other affiliations, when I first started, is the USPLHIV Caucus, Desiree Alliance that does sex work, decrim work, and got affiliated with other sex worker organizations, right? And then there's America in Transition, where a film crew followed me around at several events, telling my story. And in the midst of that, like actually being published and thinking it was done, like other stuff happened and they came back. So people actually like called me and told me that they saw this video of me on TV, and I'm like, I haven't been interviewed for anything. Like I forgot, because the body of work is extensive, but the need to do the work is also very, very extensive.
The need to do the work is extensive. Oh my gosh, isn't it so true in so many areas? But then we get to TDOR, Transgender Day of Remembrance, and the fact that we even have to have a Transgender Day of Remembrance kind of speaks to the disparities there. Like, what does that day mean to you? What does TDOR mean to you?
As a woman of trans experience, it is a reminder of all of the times that, I could have not been here with you today. It brings up feelings of survivor's guilt, especially like knowing that trans women from my hometown have been murdered. Their cases haven't gone anywhere, so no one has been caught. No one is being held accountable for those actions that happened to them. And these were women that I knew. It could have easily have been me. There are times, like I've been in this field doing this work specifically for like the last 6 years, and I didn't even have the term transgender in my vocabulary before then, although I was living my truth at 21 and I'm 44 now. So doing the math, I was simply doing me. I didn't know that there was anyone like me, but I still was at risk of violence, and violence happened to me. even after doing, like, getting into this work and learning about my community, I realized that I wasn't alone. Um, it just became, I became aware of all of the murders. And I got to a point where I don't want to hear about this. Like, don't bring up trans women, because that's basically who's being killed. Don't bring up trans women to me when they're being murdered, right? Because chances are you may know a trans person, but you choose to treat me differently. I've always had a problem with that. And it basically boils down to what is palatable to people. We're social creatures, we're very visual creatures. Sometimes you may not like what I have to say, but it'll still be the truth. And so there have just been times when I've just not wanted to celebrate at all. I've done the marches, I've organized marches, I've brought awareness here in my city. But yet, even after doing that, like, the murders continue to happen, and there's no accountability, no accountability. So it makes me mad, honestly, that there has to be a day, and that so many people are willing to recognize trans people after they're gone. But so many of us are here doing this great work, and being fed scraps, to do it. There was, if it wasn't for the Well Project, I probably would have still been volunteering, because it was here where I really began to value, like, who I am and what I bring to this organization and the work, right? But not everybody has that opportunity.
So you said some things I want to go back to. First of all, you are not 44. First of all, that's first and foremost. And second of all, just bigging up the Well Project, like the fact that they were the first organization to give you employment within this field, like, that's phenomenal. That's how I feel, the willingness to listen to the voices of the community and then to put them into leadership experiences. You're a testament to that, and I feel like I'm following in your shoes right after. Like, it's amazing because so often it's easy to feel undervalued in this field, and you just keep using your voice, doing your own local work, and that to not be recognized. Knowing that, because I can hear it already, you have a strong voice, and it sounds like it's very needed. Um, so someone to just go ahead and take that and nurture it, and I just see you're spreading your wings and flying. You sound like you're soaring. Like, that's what it sounds like. Um, so the violence is very, very tough, and it saddens me that any group of people would have to experience that. I was listening to a talk that we did previously about transgender people, and just thinking that that may even need to be defined for some people. Some people, I don't even think, understand what a trans woman or a trans man is. Would you be so kind to tell us?
Sure. Little bit of trans 101. Transgender woman is a person who was assigned male at birth, because we had nothing to do with it, right? And they based that on our genitalia. So having a penis made you male, made you a boy, and we live our life our way. We live our lives as we see ourselves. And so I was born biological male. I identify as female. And that's how I present to the world. So how I present to the world is my gender expression, right? But my gender identity is that of a trans woman or a woman of trans experience.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that Trans 101. I definitely appreciate it. I don't think that it has ever been explained to me, and I will take responsibility for not myself going to go, look, I'm sure I could have Googled that answer as well, but thank you for taking the time to express that. So when you was talking about community, you said at the age of 21 you thought you was the only one living your life like that. I can identify with that wholeheartedly. Being the only person that I knew that was living with HIV at one point, felt like I was the only person in the world. But I knew that there had to be others of us out here because it's a thing. So I know what I felt like when I found community. What did it feel like to you when you found community?
Um, the first time I came upon a community member who identified as trans, I was in Washington, D.C., speaking for the first time about being trans, about being a person living with HIV. But it wasn't, about that topic. It was about Arkansas passing the Affordable Care Act. But I just like brought who I was wholeheartedly into the room, and people picked up on that, right? And so I met Cecilia Chung in that meeting, and I also met Cecilia Chung, who's at Transgender Law Center, and I also met Angela Green at that meeting, right? Who's also in the Bay Area, and so that let me know that I wasn't alone with my gender identity. I also went into that room thinking that I was really exposed. These people are in Washington, D.C. They're all going to know that I'm living with HIV because I'm going to tell them, and they're going to judge me, right? And that's what I was thinking until after I sat down and we had a comment section, and half of the room were people living with HIV, right? I came from Little Rock, and I was like, I just know that I don't look sick. I don't feel sick. I wasn't educated about HIV. I was simply just taking the medicine at that time. And that opened my eyes to like what it meant to truly live, with HIV, or have HIV live with you, because these people were soaring and they were brilliant. And I wanted what they had, right? In spite of a diagnosis, or in spite of society saying that you are not who you say you are, right? Like, these people were powerful, and I wanted what they had. And so Cecilia Chung called me later that year and asked me to be a part of Positively Trans, a new program that she was starting. And it would give trans people living with HIV the opportunity to advocate for our needs, to actually think about what it is that we need from organizations and from services, right, as trans people living with HIV. And from that came the needs assessment that we brought out, like World AIDS Day, I think maybe 2015. So it gave us standing in the HIV community, because now here were all of these trans people living with HIV willing to be in community with other people living with HIV, right? And so these trans one-on-ones, we're not new to it, right? Like, you're not the first person to say that. That just hasn't been your experience that you know of. But you are a person that is willing to learn and ask those questions, right? And so that's how we move forward with the trans agenda for liberation, by moving out of the way, right? I don't need you to do the work for me. I am fully capable of doing the work myself. I know what it is that I need. I know how to tell people what I need. I just need like the space to do that, right? And so Positively Trans became that space for us to not only talk about like what it is that we need, but just to talk about like what it is that we're going through. And that's when I realized that I was in community for the first time, when I'm in a hotel room with basically strangers, but they're feeling like family. I don't have to explain my existence to them like I had to explain it, or still have to explain it, to my own genetic family, right? They just got it. And it clicked for me. Like, these are my people, right? And so that's basically how I framed my advocacy. People, they understand that I'm trans, and so I'm going to advocate for that, right? But the first thing you see is that I'm Black, right? And so there are all these like intersecting parts of my identity that put me at a heightened chance for criminalization. And so like that brought on so much more work that needed to be done. And it just, these coalitions and networks of people living with HIV that I have come to know, love, and respect, and some whom we've lost, like, they built me up to be the advocate that I am today, to be the leader that I am today. And I'll own that today. I'll own that I'm a leader today. I wouldn't have a few years ago.
All right, well, that's about to go into a different direction because sis helped me. I'm trying to accept that I'm a leader. At some point you just feel like you're telling your story, you're showing up to these different events and discussions, and then people start to look at you that way. But to accept that on your own, it's like, whoa, I'm just out here living my life. I didn't think that I was doing anything that phenomenal, but it's so needed because I feel like so many people feel like they don't have a voice. We all have one, but people feel like they don't have one. So to see you or to see me or to see, other advocates getting up to speak, I think is empowering to so many other ones. And that makes my heart feel so good. Finding that tribe, oh my gosh, that was like, oh my gosh, there's so many people out here. Oh my God. And you're right, I don't know your experience. My experience with HIV by itself is I can go in and they're not looking at me any type of way. Like we're a room full of people that I know living with HIV, and we don't have to discuss that. Medication ain't a thing. They're not looking at me funny. Like not looking at me like, how can you do this and that? We don't have to have that conversation. We can talk about when rent is due. We could talk about, how we going to get this food in this refrigerator, things like that. And I really appreciate that. So I'm proud and happy for you that you were able to find a community so long ago, it seems. And I know that I saw you the first time at a conference somewhere on stage with, it was you equals you stuff, and it was Bruce and Davina, and it was you. And I was like, oh my God, she's so pretty. I don't even think that I realized at first that, that I was experiencing you as a trans woman. I didn't know. So I'm so grateful to, even be able to be in a space because normally, I would not feel comfortable to be able to have a conversation like this. So thank you for accepting it and knowing that it's coming from a real, genuine, and sincere space. I appreciate that without becoming offended.
No problem.
So we have some questions from the cab. I'm just going to disperse them out while we're speaking. One question, it comes from Katie. She says, why is trans suicide not included in the list of lives lost to violence? I consider it murder by transphobia, death by 1,000 cuts, so to speak. It should be counted as violence against the transgender community, in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
I wholeheartedly agree. Um, when I put on the march, those names of the ones that we lost to suicide were included. I feel the same way. I know what it feels like to contemplate suicide. Um, and Katie's absolutely right. It was because of all of the societal pressures, whether it came from family, whether it came from jabs from friends, whether it just came from like pure hate and people stated their intentions against me. I felt as though I wasn't good enough. Like I didn't have a place in this world, right? No one would ever truly accept me and see me as I see myself. Uh, and not just this, but just like this is just a part of me. This is who I project to the on the outside. I'm talking about who I am on the inside, and how I will go to bat for like the people that I love, and how I will help out a stranger. And you just can't come and stay with me. I need my space, but I will make space for you. I will, but to some people that just doesn't count. I mean, not to say that I care about their opinions about me, but it took me getting to a place where that didn't phase me to the point where I felt like those people who actually were successful in their suicide attempts, right? But I know what that's like. I know to be what it feels like to be on the brink of wanting to do it, and then just not wanting to be found, or put my mom through that. In my deepest, darkest times, it was my mom who pulled me through. She was my higher power. Her love to me felt very unconditional. Even though at the time when I was growing up, I didn't feel like I got that from the rest of the family, but it was enough from my mom to sustain me. So when it's a parent who makes you feel less than, I don't know, I don't, other than like my dad and stuff that we went through, but our relationship is different now. And I speak to that as well. So I just kept pushing, but some people have no fight left in them. I agree with Katie.
Yes, that's difficult. Just suicide, period. I've been there, and I can feel the darkness. Like now, just even when the word is so triggering for me, it feels very dark, and that lack of acceptance, and you know, sometimes not being able to love myself because how I am being treated by those around me, those who say that they love me, and feeling that low. No one should ever have to experience that. Like it is not I'm, you should not have that much control over what I'm feeling on the inside. Yet it happens because, as you said, we are social beings. Like, I don't need to be liked by everybody, but I definitely deserve my respect. Like, regardless of how you feel about whatever I'm living my life like, I still deserve that respect. And so do you, and the next person, and the next person. And I just wish that we as a whole would get better in that area. It's so disheartening. Talking about the needs assessment, what needs were you all able to identify that are needed? Like, what does the trans community need?
The, if I remember correctly, top priority was trans affirming healthcare. Top priority. Um, and when it came to top legal need, it was HIV criminalization. Now, when it comes to health, that's one thing that we realized when it came to our health issues, and of those that we surveyed, those who completed the survey, um, trans affirming healthcare was number one. Um, we see who we're supposed to be, and insurance will block it, right? And there are other means of doing stuff that are not safe. It has cost trans women's lives. And I, again, going back to what Katie said, like that was murder by the insurance companies, right? I think that they got the wrong person in jail. Uh, you know, I work at the Transgender Law Center. California insurance is A1. If I wanted a surgery and lived in California, I wouldn't have to worry about it. I work for the Transgender Law Center. California covers my insurance through a branch in Arkansas, where Arkansas has these laws, and just tried to place all these bans on trans youth, right? So now someone has to advocate on my behalf in order for me to have the surgeries that I am okay to have. I have a surgeon set up, you know, all of these things, right? Um, but then when it comes to us being who we are legally, having the correct documentation, not being arrested for walking while trans, thought to be sex workers, where sex work is criminalized. Stop using condoms as evidence of as proof of sex work, because in some states, and this is where some of the positively trans members' input is so valuable. Having a sex worker charge is a crime against nature. Like what? Um, you know, you can have a sex offender be on a sex offender registry. Like how are these, and they're targeting us, right? Because already it's hard to sustain employment, because of all of these laws that are now making it legal to discriminate against us in areas of employment, trying to use public facilities, so trying to get an education. I remember going to college and having to walk clean across campus just to use the unisex bathroom. You know what I'm saying? Because like I don't have time for anyone trying to pressure me. Because when I was working at a job and I went into the women's restroom, I wasn't good enough to be in there either. And someone called themselves ratting me out. And because my documentation did not say female, I was not allowed to use that restroom. But every time I did go into the male's restroom, I became this public spectacle. And I went through that for 2.5 years before the Well Project hired me on. Like, I would, the way I feel now, I would never step foot into an office that isn't specifically led by trans people. I don't have time for it.
Whew, that's deep. Like I can't imagine having to hold my pee to get across, a campus to use the restroom, just because of how I am expressing my gender. Like Thank you for sharing. These are things I'm glad we have conversations because I wouldn't normally like think of that. Like you would not think that using the restroom would be a stress point for anyone. That's horrible. Krista asked a question. It's here. Um, can you speak to women of trans experience who might want to do more public advocacy and how you've had to navigate that as you become more well known?
Um, okay, so first I want to say you're going to become visible, so you need to be sure that this is what you really want to do. At the time, for me, I was just speaking at this one event, right? And before I sat down, people were already calling back to Arkansas wanting to meet me. I didn't even know at the time that I had anything to say. I was asked a specific thing. I brought who I was into the conversation, and everybody wanted to meet me. So that brought in like HIV criminalization. I went to HIV is not a crime for the first time. And that's when I realized that being in Arkansas and being a person living with HIV, like that puts me at a high risk for being in prison. So I don't deal with like not telling people. I make sure that I tell them, I have a track record of telling them. I'm gonna have it on paper. Somebody can print it out some type of way, right? But I'm like, I just don't have time for me trying to do this work and then like somebody being jealous and or mad that I don't have enough time for them and then threatening me with having me prosecuted or whatever. So as a person living with HIV, I had to become aware that my status was going to be out there, and it was. I thought I was in a safe space around other people living with HIV and never paying attention to reporters. And my story came out, and I was on the cover of a magazine that I knew nothing about at the time. And so, but people in the HIV community knew. And so they were sharing it on social media, and everybody started calling me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I saw it, and as fast as I tried to delete it, it would show up again. My name was tagged again. So I went through that. So just make sure that you know what could possibly happen. You're going to be visible. Be prepared not only for like the praises, but be prepared for like the criticism that you will receive. I have done this work and been on interview and on camera and never go to the comments. Never go to the comments, especially if it's a news source that I don't particularly know, but I'm speaking on a topic and I mentioned that I'm trans. I never read the comments because they try to tear me down for my status, and they try to tear me down for my gender identity. And so I just don't have time for that because I'm a fighter. I didn't get to be 44 by being weak, and so I brought that into advocacy. I truly did. I was really rough, really unpolished. So I don't know if people will say that it was respectability politics or not, but I went by what I heard. I was introduced to Positive Women's Network. They're a rowdy group of women who do not mind like protesting some shit. So I was like, okay, this is what we do, right? And I would go to these conferences, and each conference that I went to, there was a protest, and I'm like, what are people angry for? So I would. That's what I knew to do, and it became apparent that people were monitoring my social media because my social media, oh, you did not want to be on my bad side on social media. That goes for advocates. That goes for whoever. You really didn't want to be on my bad side. And so I had to learn how to tone that down. I really did. I had to learn how to tone that down so that I could get my message across, or the message of the community that's trusting me to share this message, right? And so I stopped thinking so much about myself and really started thinking about my community and how me being in this space at this time can really advance like the needs assessment for my community. But yeah, you're going to have to get out of self even though you're the one getting all of the accolades. You're going to have to get out of self, because this has never been about me. It hasn't. I got into advocacy because I made a promise to my higher power, that when I learned I was positive, if I get through it, then I will promote as much education and awareness about HIV as I could. And so February 27, 2014, my higher power presented that opportunity to me. And so I stuck to it, right? I'm a woman of my word. And so if I say that I'm going to do something, you can bank on it, right? And so people saw that I was dependable. They saw that I knew what I was talking about, and they started trusting me. Like, even when there were moments when I still had to blow up, because sometimes you just have to flip a table to get the message across. Sorry. Don't think that it's all peaches and cream over here. It's not. There's definitely a hood chick, that I keep at bay too. So I've brought all of that into advocacy, and those moments get recorded too. So I would say be aware of what could happen. Be aware of what could happen, but also be, just be you. Because at the end of the day, all I have to do is really be myself. I'm not trying to be anybody else. I'm not trying to be the other trans women and positively trans, because they're doing them, right? I can only bring myself to the conversation. And so, yeah, just be aware of what you put out there. It stays out there. And some things that are said about you, you're not going to agree with. And it's that point that you actually determine what type of leader you are. Because I was going back and forward with people on social media. That's what type of leader I was. Like, don't try it. But, now I'm like, okay, we can have a conversation and I can educate you, which I tried to do then. I came with an education piece first. But when you're so set in your ways, then I'm like, oh, okay, now I know where you stand. So now let me tell you what type of person I really am. See, that was the professional Tiommi. That was, but let me show you who I really am and what roots I come from. So, yeah.
Not the flipping the tables. Yo, you got me over here crying. Okay. So you are getting a lot of questions going on in this comment section. So Joe asks a big question. Is being a trans living with HIV a huge social problem / stigma here? Here in India, well, she's saying here in the U.S. Here in India, though there are laws, police do nothing to help in case they run into any legal issues and had to sort help from the NGOs. I think you kind of touched on that a little earlier. But what would you say to speak to that stigma and how there is like a lack of support?
So thank you, Joe. I know Joe. We were on the board together. So as a trans person living with HIV, I'll bring this into the conversation. Leaving a positively trans meeting, right? We were in DC. I was supposed to go through Chicago before getting to Little Rock. The weather was really crazy in DC. There were grounding flights. I needed to get home. I wasn't working in the HIV field at the time. I was doing volunteer work and getting paid stipends. So I had a job that I had to get back to because I asked for a certain amount of days off. So I was able to get out of DC, go to Charlotte. In Charlotte, as soon as I touched down, I had to run to my next gate. So I run to the gate. There's this guy there. I see him, not really paying attention to him because by this time I'm tired. And I'm just breathing, get on the plane, phone goes dead. I don't have a means to get home, right? And I'm talking out loud because I'm freaking out just getting on this plane. I'm finna go home, but how the hell am I gonna get home, right? So long story short, this guy gives me a ride home and ends up sexually assaulting me. It took me a week, and then like being in community, having someone of trans experience there with me before I was even able strong enough to call the police. So an officer came out to my house, and in that week's time, I'm talking to different leaders in the HIV field because I'm in Arkansas. There's a woman in prison right now for not disclosing to her attacker that she was living with HIV. I don't want that to be my situation. I didn't do anything wrong. So there are laws against sexual assault. And their advice to me was to not disclose to the police that I'm living with HIV because it could happen to me. First of all, I'm Black, I'm trans, and I'm living with HIV. Oh, you ain't even got to roll the dice, I'm going to jail. So I built up the strength and courage to actually make a report. And because I'm trans, it didn't go anywhere. So realizing that I'm not safe in my own home sent me into a deep depression. And that the police were not there to serve and protect, right? Put me in a deep depression. And it took like a year of therapy and even medication for me to get over that. I did not feel safe in that house. I ended up leaving that house and going to live with a guy that I knew I really didn't care anything for. But I'm like, I got a job now. I'm doing all of this consultancy work. So I got money coming in, but I just didn't feel safe in my own home, to the point where I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't function at work. I'm a server and I would forget a drink order after writing it down. You know what I'm saying? Like, it really fucked with me. And so it took a year of me getting, myself together and trying different medicines for different antidepressants. And I was like, okay, this is who I am to these people in Arkansas, right? And so that's why I've, been working with different organizations trying to get these laws reversed, because I was the one that was in danger. I'm in a different place now, but I don't trust having people in my space like that. It's something I still deal with today. So yeah, and that's because of the stigma that's attached to being a person living with HIV. How are you gonna put the onus on me when I'm being sexually violated? I told this guy that I was trans, hoping that would get him the hell off of me. But no, now he doesn't even see me as a person. So I'm not gonna say anything that could set him off at all. I just took it and he left. And when I filed the report, I had evidence and they were like, but it could have been consensual. And I was like, okay, now you can leave. Now you can leave. You're not going to do that to me. I didn't ask for this. And because of who I am and what I look like doesn't mean that I deserve to be treated like that.
You're absolutely right. You don't deserve. That was said. I saw Bridget's comments come up. I couldn't imagine either. And thank you for the work. I know it becomes a little bit more. It's when you've personally been through something, you can feel it a little bit more, and then the fight is so much stronger because no one else should have to experience that. Nobody. This comment, we keep getting it from a couple of different sources. I think Jenna just posted it. Can you talk a little about your experiences as a trans woman in the HIV community, and whether there's anything that you think the community could do better with regard to trans women?
Okay. So, like I said, my experience, first there was the Well Project, who saw something in me, like through my writing, right? Saw that there was something there. So we started cultivating like who I am. I started going to these trainings, not only like telling my story, but also like getting educated on things around me that impact me, either for my gender identity or because of my Ciarra status, right? And so they made space. They made the space available for me to have a voice through the blog, to have employment by coming on board, right? And then like I started working with Positive Women's Network, who were doing the same thing, who were empowering not only cis women, but trans women to advocate for their needs, right? They're a social justice organization. And so when we're at conferences. We've made space for trans women to hold institutes, bringing us together, right? So that we can hear what it is that is happening around the country. Because if it wasn't for Positively Trans, I would feel really, really alone right now. We have a monthly call. I know these people, I respect these people. And Transgender Law Center made space for trans people living with HIV, right? And so it's all about like making the space, trusting their leadership, not trying to speak for us. It's kind of like these federal organizations, right, that make these plans for people living with HIV, but don't include people living with HIV in the planning, in the implementation, none of that, right? So making sure that our space is meaningful to us, not to your bottom line when it comes to organizations. If I'm going to be quite honest about it, I don't want to hear from organizations during Transgender Day of Visibility or Transgender Day of Remembrance. If you can only think of us 2 times out of the year, what does that really say about like your commitment to the liberation of trans people? Because in all honesty, trans people living with HIV, trans people, period, are like the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to who's important in society's eyes. It's white cis men first, white cis women. And then if you're going to go down the LGBT community, then it's gay white men first. I mean, come on, like, and we're at the very bottom. When you're grouped with a certain subset of people who do not identify as you, they're not going to understand what it is that you're going through. Okay, so gay men do not have the right, nor the space, nor the agency to tell me that I've gone too far. In what way? In what way? Because there are a lot of things that you don't know about me that might surprise you, but saying that I'm gay, I'm a gay man, is absolutely incorrect. I don't identify with you. I don't experience life as you did. And if to be quite honest, I was never with a man as a man. Like, that's my experience. So no, when my mom told me at 19 years old, when I told her that I had started smoking cigarettes, and she replied that she would love me even if I was gay, I didn't know how to take that. I'm like, okay, but that's not who I am, And so 2 years later, hair changed, and she's like, okay. And that was my relationship with my mom, right? And so my mom definitely kept space not only in her heart, but in her house for me. I was her child. If I had changed my name at that time, she would have gone by it, because before she died, I did change my name. And she was calling me by my name, right? And so just making the space, getting out of the way, trusting our leadership, and not speaking for us is what these organizations can really do. And to go even further, fund, donate to trans-led organizations, specifically Black trans-led organizations, because again, when you're a white trans-led organization, you're getting the money. You are. And we are pulling together resources to make sure that someone who needs something actually has it, right? So there's the Black Trans Fund. There is New York Transgender Advocacy Group. There's the Black Trans Women of Color Collective, right? There is Trans Sister of Color Project. Write them out, look them up. They can do the work themselves, and they would really appreciate your donations.
Well, thank you. Olivia is mimicking it as well. She says, love, thank you so much always for sharing so incisively and beautifully. Some people call TDOR Transgender Day of Resilience. I wonder if you speak to what that means. The level of violence and disrespect our trans family are subject to is disgusting, horrific, traumatic, and also trans communities are top of the world in modeling mutual aid, support, survival, thriving, dot, dot, dot.
Yeah. Um, In all honesty, this is not new to us. You want to talk about resilience? I wouldn't say that that's me. I would say that those are my elders. Um, Again, they paved the way for me to be here today. And the work that I'm doing is paving the way for the next generation, right? I stand on the shoulders of giants, and some of those giants are Kyler Brodus, Miss Major Griffin Gracie, right? We have Sharon. What is Sharon's last name? We have Mama Didi Chambly, right? Um, those who made sure that we didn't get arrested for being who we are. When they were my age and younger, they didn't have these freedoms. They didn't. They probably didn't even have the term transgender in their vocabulary, right? We're not a monolith. The vocabulary is ever changing, just like the times are changing, right? And so when I think of resilience, I think of those who are still here, who absolutely defy the notion that the average lifespan for a trans person, a trans woman who's Black, is 35. They defy that. These are all Black trans people who are in their 60s and 70s that I'm referring to, who are still here and still doing the work. That's resilience. That is telling the man, that is telling their families, the people that they come across on the street, that I am enough. You don't have to like it. And that's where I got it from. And then they had that unconditional love and support. You had Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson at Star, who opened up like this house so that poor young trans kids would have somewhere to stay when there was nowhere else. Some of us are still homeless. Some of us still cannot get in a shelter that aligns with our gender identity. This is still happening, right? And so when you have people like Miss Major who have these houses and these retreats so that we can come and be in community, that is resilience. That's healing our entire community, right? Because what you put out there, you're going to pass on. I mean, and someone else is going to pick it up, right? And so you have Daranisha Duncan who are doing things like that, like just took a whole group of people, I think to Florida, right, for a retreat. You know what I'm saying? Like those are the things that are needed, that healing, that community healing. And so when my community heals, like we're all going to heal. We are, because those who are not of my community have been the ones to oppress us. So when we're able to heal and we're able to gather ourselves and do the work ourselves, like we can continue to fight for the liberation of others instead of putting ours on the back burner because we're a part of so many other movements. So the resilience comes in having to do the work on behalf of others and for ourselves during a time when people are still saying that we're not enough, and we're owning that we are.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Um, let's see. Bridget, one of our other community advisory board members, I love her, right? What would your advice be to people trying to or not trying to understand the trans experience? We ain't flipping no tables, right? Because we're coming with love and education. I know.
Okay. I would say that you don't have to understand it to respect it, because what I'm doing inside of my house or how I present outside of my house does not impact you. It doesn't stop any money from coming to you. It doesn't stop you having a meal, right? I'm living my life the way that I want to live my life. I'm not concerned about Cece's experience. Cece's a person. That's all that Cece has to be for me to be a decent human being. People don't feel like we are deserving of respect, right? You don't have to accept me. I told my family that years ago, and you know how I proved that to them? I wasn't around. I was happy. I'm not gonna lie. I was happy, I don't see too many wrinkles. I got on a little bit of MAC, but you don't see too many wrinkles. That means I ain't stressed. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to understand things to respect that this is the way it is, right? You don't. I didn't understand Michael Jackson's skin pigmentation, but I accepted that that's what it was. You know, I never was disrespectful. Michael will always be the king of pop to me. Whether he looked like me when he was born and then didn't when he died, still that's not my business. I'm just going to say you don't have to understand my experience to be a decent human being when you do encounter me. If you have questions, hi, my name is such and such, my pronouns are, that goes a long way to engaging in the conversation about gender. Sometimes it's as easy as that, right? And people are actually having a hard time talking about pronouns. Why? Why? That means you're sitting in a place of privilege to where you don't have to worry about pronouns because society already sees that you're that, right? Instead of the other way around, where my pronouns really mean so much to me. It's who I am. It's who I am. But you don't have to understand it to respect it. And I'm not asking you to accept me, because I don't stay up at night wondering who doesn't like me. I'm gonna tell you the truth. I go to sleep around 8 o'clock, wake up at 4 o'clock. I'm like, damn, you are old. You're old. You getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and used to laugh and be mad when your mama did it and was making noise. But now I'm getting up 4 o'clock in the morning faithfully. Yep.
I agree. Bridget says that's what her point was. Just respect it. I'll continue. I think we need to keep saying it until people get it. Understanding is not as important as respect. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm loving this. And I know we're running short on time. So Katie had another question. Perhaps the greatest memorial to give someone lost to death is preventative action to keep it from happening again. That already is profound. Goodness, Katie. Other than candlelight vigils, what actions can be done to honor the lost, raise awareness, and stop the violence?
Well, what has been happening, I mean, like, that's what the first Transgender Day of Remembrance was. It was a candlelight vigil to Rita Hester in some part of Texas, I want to believe, trans woman who was lost to violence, to murder. And so it picked up right now, I think like 185 cities and countries actually do that thing, right, in honor of the very first one. But if you want to raise awareness, I think it starts by making space in days that are not Transgender Day of Remembrance. If you want to stop this from happening, then you need to be able to go into places that advocate for harm against people who identify as trans. So that's your church, that's your home. You know what I'm saying? If you don't know where to get educated, hit me up. I do these trainings all the time. Your home, your church, it's got to linger into the schools, because trans kids are being bullied to the point where they're actually successfully completing suicide, right? And so that's how you stop all of this. It's more than just one day. It has to be an everyday thing. Every day that I go outside, I run the risk of not coming back home. That's my experience. You will never understand what that feels like, to have to put on a brave face, go out and constantly tell people, no, I don't want to get in the car with you. I don't want to talk to you, and feeling like you don't have a choice because, like I said, some people don't take no for an answer. But I just don't want to be bothered. Can I not have that? Can I have that? I am owed that much, the opportunity to be by myself. And so I don't want to be the one to always educate everyone. I don't want to be that one. I want to educate you, and then you take it off. You pay it forward, And like I said, my advocacy is not about me. like there are stories, my story like relates to other people of trans experience, but some of theirs are far more horrific than mine, to where I was in tears. Like, wow, how strong are you to continue to be here? But in the interim, all this violence keeps happening because you got laws that are saying it's okay to discriminate against us. They're passing down these beliefs that we're not human. When it came from the highest office of the land, of course, people heard it. So be mindful of the platforms that you hold and the influence that you have. And if you don't understand something, then don't speak on it. It costs absolutely nothing to just mind your business. Absolutely nothing. And when you speak on stuff that you don't know about, that's when we all know that you're an idiot. We never would have known it if you hadn't opened up your mouth. So I'm not going to speak on things that I don't know about. I'm going to ask for the education and then I'm going to try to pass it on. And it doesn't happen as it doesn't happen just doing it on one day. It really doesn't. It has to be a constant thing.
Absolutely. I would like to say that I am very grateful again for the space that the Well Project gives all of us, for our voice. And, just every day in my community, these are not conversations that I feel like I would be comfortable enough to have, and you have made this so easy. Like, I feel like I've learned so much. I feel like I can relate to you on so many different levels, with my experience not even being, what your experience is. Not No two experiences are the same anyway. um I'm grateful to see, the bridging together of the trans women and the cis women. Those are two terms that I honestly, before I started HIV work, I didn't even know. I don't know if they're just that new or if I was just so oblivious, you know, to not know. And for you to bring out the point of, the pronouns, I felt a little, ashamed and hit a little bit because I didn't realize that, me stating my pronouns, because it isn't a big thing to me. And I didn't realize I was operating from a space of privilege. But okay, heard, got you. I will make sure I include them joints because just a little small act like that, you don't realize that you're supporting people outside of yourself. Um, it was brought to me one time, maybe I'll start using the word partner versus, boyfriend or husband or something like that, because it would be showing support to another another person. So thank you. I have a lot of things to go back and reflect on myself after this. Thank you again. Is there anything that you would like to leave the people with as we're coming very close to the end of our episode? This has been great, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So again, like I said, but I'm not the only one that is doing these trainings. If you are looking for any type of sensitivity training, cultural training for your organization, then go onto the PWN USA website and look up the gender justice trainers. You will see 8 different people of trans experience who are able to facilitate different trainings according to like what it is that you're asking for. So that's one way that you can spread awareness to your community in a central setting, hopefully a brave space, to be able to have courageous conversations with people of trans experience and to learn from people of trans experience. So yeah, I didn't want to leave the people thinking that like I know everything. No, and I'm not the only one doing this work. And yeah, I just really want to thank everyone that was able to join. I can't see anything because I'm on a whole different screen. But yeah, Joe, Bridget, Jenna, Olivia, Krista, my friend, my sister, always, always, I love you.
Uh, Now I feel like we're supposed to do a big group hug or something, but there you go. Okay, so this has been an amazing episode, as I said. Everybody that's here, wait a minute before you click out. We have posted our survey link in the chat box. So could you please take a moment to fill that out for us? Your voice matters. The Well Project definitely responds to it. We build programming around it and everything. So to continue to make sure that our needs are met and, well, the community's needs, not our needs, are met, I would please ask that you would take a moment to fill that out. So, our outro now. Thank you all for joining us for the 13th episode of the Well Project's A Girl Like Me Live. Please join us again. I believe it's on December 17th. We will be skipping next episode, because that will be World AIDS Day and there's so much going on. But we do have some really exciting things going on in the meantime. So we look forward to seeing you, and thank you once again for joining. Have a good day, y'all. Let's see now.